What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Average Fan Podcast. I am just going to hide off screen because I am not worthy, because we have a Pulitzer Prize capable journalist here in Oliver Souls. We are going to talk about Michelle Rue stepping down, a story that was broken on the Blazing Musket. The only official comment from the team is on the Blazing Musket and their social media pages, because Oliver is a great journalist. So everybody go support him. But yes, we will talk about Michelle Rue leaving Hartford Athletic, which everyone wants to talk about. And we will also touch on the Detroit City game and the upcoming USL Cup match. But Oliver, I'm going to momentarily return to stream. But how are you doing, friend?
I'm good. Hartford scored some goals on Saturday, which was great. They haven't done that. They didn't do that at all in the month of April, which was kind of crazy. So to kick off May with two goals, it wasn't pretty. It could have been better. But I do feel pretty good about that.
I mean, you score some goals, lose a COO, and somehow vibes are just through the roof at the moment.
I mean, one thing that, and this was true last year, was that we got through the early part of the season where their team was not playing particularly well. They were on like 6 points in mid-June, and everyone was complaining. There were the fan protests, all this stuff, and then they start winning, and people stop grumbling. Right? Winning fixes just about everything in professional sports. Um, and to be fair, Hartford wasn't losing; they were just not scoring any goals. So when the product on the field is more pleasing to look at, when the fans are going home happy from home games, it does really make people feel a lot better. That said, it isn't going to fix some of the operational issues that have really plagued the team. There needs to be more than that.
Yes, and let's get right into it. I'm dubbing it the ruining. But Oliver, I guess just immediate takeaways with Michelle Rue leaving the organization. Just what does it mean for Hartford Athletic, and what is kind of the fallout from the situation?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I would say is that it is a pretty sudden change of direction. So if we go back a couple of weeks, just before the Rhode Island game, that week I was hearing that Bruce Mendel had confidence in Michelle Rue. She was going to be around. There was no sense that she was going to be a casualty in any way of any of the front office issues that Harper was having. So to come, 2 weeks later, where last week I was starting to hear that this was maybe in the works. She hadn't been in the office. People were uncertain about her future all of a sudden. Then by the end of the week, it became there's going to be a change in a couple of days. We just don't know exactly what it's going to be. And then by Saturday, it seemed pretty apparent that she was on her way out. That's a pretty abrupt turnaround. And there's not really any clear sense now of what drove that. If it was truly a resignation, as was communicated to Hartford Athletic employees on Monday, um, then we don't know why. We don't know what happened that caused her to take that action. If it wasn't truly a resignation, if it was kind of a forced resignation situation, or if she were actually fired and resignation is just the language that's kind of painting over that, we don't really have any clear information about what exactly transpired in that 2 week period to really turn that ship around to go from she's not going anywhere to she's out of the club and she's deleted her LinkedIn profile. Now, in terms of the immediate fallout, um, a couple of things are immediately obvious. One is that Bruce Mandel is going to step into the day-to-day operational management of the club. That did not elicit a really positive reaction from folks when they heard about that on social media, on Reddit, and other places. It was sort of like, well, this is just more of the same. Bruce Mandel is part of the problem. Be that as it may, I don't know that we're really on any other options. There isn't anybody really remaining in senior leadership in the club who has operational experience that could have stepped into that role. There are very few people with the club who have any tenure of any kind with Hartford Athletic. So I think the options were either Bruce Mandel steps in and does it, or you create some situation where you elevate Brendan Burke as club president in addition to first team coach. And then he has to end up delegating that responsibility to somebody else anyway because he has a club, first team to run, right, and make successful. Um, so I don't think there were a lot of short term options here, and Bruce Mandel stepping in is probably the only one that truly, honestly made sense for the short term. Now, I understand why fans are nervous about that, and we want to hear a little bit more, perhaps, about what the plan is for the future, and hopefully we get to hear that relatively soon. But that's the first thing. The first thing is that's what's going to happen on the day to day. The second thing is I heard from a number of former club employees, and I don't think a single one had anything positive to say about Michelle Rue's tenure at Hartford Athletic. I didn't hear from every single former employee. You know, we know there's been something like 35 departures over the last 18 months, which is a really shocking number, given that the club only has, I think, 25 employees listed. I didn't hear from all of them. So there may very well be folks who left the club, felt good about Michelle Rue, and didn't feel, inclined to reach out to me either by text message or to DM me on various social media platforms. Um, but I didn't get any feedback that wasn't almost, I think, universally negative around her leadership of the club. And so the reaction from a lot of people was, we're not surprised. We're only surprised that it took this long. Nothing good has come of this tenure. It's really decimated the front office. And the other thing I will say is on Saturday night when I was at the stadium, it wasn't official and nobody would comment on whether or not Michelle Rue was out of the club. But the demeanor of the club employees that I was interacting with, just in the course of being at the stadium and not particularly asking them about Michelle Rue, their demeanor was totally transformed. People looked happy. People looked like a weight had been lifted off their shoulders. And I think that is really I think to me is the most indicative thing here is that it just didn't feel like anybody was really all that sad to see her go.
Yeah, and I think, it's quite interesting, if you're kind of frequent on the Hartford Reddit, if you're on, maybe the various Hartford Discords. I mean, even with fans, she's kind of persona non grata. I guess why is that the case? And, like you mentioned, why is there kind of this sudden sense of relief from club employees and just kind of a breath of fresh air, if you will, kind of surrounding the kind of operations of the club?
Yeah. Well, I think there's two things. One, this season in particular, there had been a lot of operational missteps and things that were very obvious to fans. We talked about some of them already on previous episodes of this podcast. Even things as basic as nobody got porta potties at the first home game for the parking lot, or there were issues with parking around communication where people were supposed to park. There were issues with various season ticket member rewards. Vendors were not accepting coupons. There were things that were really degrading the fan experience. And of course, the most important one of all was the fiasco with $2 beers, right? Which is the one that got everybody really hot and bothered. Um, and was ultimately that was kind of my entry point for writing about this, right? And the article that was published on Saturday was what's going on with the beer, and it grew from there. So those are things that had become really, really apparent to fans this season. And some of them had been apparent previously. Looking back last year, there were definitely times where it felt like things were only being held together operationally by employees who had been with the club a very long time and were highly experienced in the game day operations at Trinity Health Stadium. And those employees have almost universally left the organization from last season to this season. So there was this sense that nobody knew what was going on. There was really not any communication. Um, there were times where I had interactions with vendors like CSC who provide the event security, and it was just very clear that they did not have accurate information about what was happening in the stadium. And that's on the club to provide that information and make sure that that happens. So one thing that I think caused fans to turn against Michelle Rue was this perception that the buck stops with her. She's the chief operating officer, was the chief operating officer. If there's operational failures, ultimately they have to be owned by the person at the top of that pyramid. Whether that means they should be hiring different people, whatever it is, that was a big part of why I think fans were so frustrated with her. The other thing was that, as is I think often the case in lower division sports, there is not like a real firewall between fans and club employees, like there might be at the higher professional levels. Like if you're in the Premier League, even your most hardcore supporters don't have deep connections in the front office. There may be a few folks that they get close to just in the nature of that relationship. But at Hartford Athletic, there are fans who have deep connections and relationships with club employees. Um, around the stadium on game day. Even just going to the stadium, there were people that I talked to probably every game of the season, even if it was just to say hello, a couple of minutes, how you doing, what's going on with you. And that's true for a lot of fans. And so I think employees who had been frustrated and had been sharing some of their experiences, not just with me, but with other fans that they had relationships with, had also given fans this perspective that not just were there these operational failures, but there were things going on behind the scenes that they did not like because it was having a negative impact on these people that they had relationships with or were their friends or that they cared about. And so I think that was another part of it for a lot of the really invested fans was seeing what they perceived as somebody who was um, directly degrading the experience in a way that wasn't just, oh, the beer is more expensive. It was these employees that we have built relationships with over years are now gone, right? And it was being that blame for that was being directed at Michelle Rue. Whether that was fair or not, I think in many cases it certainly was fair, but perhaps not at all. So I think those were kind of the two things for fans why this was received with such overwhelming relief. And just yes, good. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. I think was one comment on Reddit. Um, and I think also because if you were talking about like let's say MLS or Premier League club, and the club was having success on the field, I don't know that fans would give a shit of who the chief operating officer or CEO of the club was, right? Like that becomes so much inside baseball for people. If the product on the field is good, if things are successful, and Hartford is having their most successful stretch in club history, but because we're at this level where there's everything is so close and everything is so connected, fans are invested in who's running things. Are they going to bring us a cooler Modelo's out to the parking lot like before the game to make nice with us? Are they going to have what, et cetera, right? And that just wasn't there. And so I think it was again in part a function of just how small the world of lower division soccer really is.
Definitely, and I'll gladly big up you. Great work from Oliver in terms of his reporting on the whole Michelle Rue situation, but then also to that article that you put out on Saturday. I'm probably actively looking to find places to submit it, so that you just have a pile of awards that you get because it's very well done, very well done. But we have talked about the ruining enough. Please, everyone listening, stay and hear us talk about the actual soccer. So going to talk about, we'll start off with Detroit City. A very interesting game. Again, you see, uh, Hartford get on the scoreboard. You see, Arturo Despe, I believe, make history, for Hartford Athletic, and even earn, Team of the Week honors for it. But I guess just kind of starting off, Oliver, what were your impressions of the match?
Uh, it was not super good, all things considered. Before the game, Brendan Burke had said that he thought the first 15 minutes were going to kind of show him everything he needs to know about how his team had received the message of the last couple of weeks. And I will be honest, I did not see much in that first 15 minutes to suggest that anything had really changed. It looked very much the same. Maybe going long a little bit less, maybe a little bit more of an effort to build up the play. But overall, it was still pretty drab. There was not a lot of attack and bite. Uh, I don't think there was either team took a shot through the first 25 minutes. Now it was raining, not great conditions. Um, we haven't really talked about it, but the turf at Trinity Health is incredibly degraded and it needs to be maintained, and that's supposedly happening now, before Hartford come back home again in a couple of weeks. So conditions not great, and Detroit are a very difficult team, a very defensively organized team. So you can give Detroit some credit and say that they maybe were frustrating Hartford as well. But I was not particularly blown away by the first 25 minutes. It got a little bit better as the half went on, but not a ton better. There were some good opportunities at each end of the pitch. Anthony Siaha had to save very, very well at a couple of points, uh, to kind of keep Detroit out of the net. But even in the second half, it started brightly. There were some chances early, but this game just never really got going. Like there would be these moments of like, oh, it's getting a little more end to end, and then it would kind of fizzle out and so on. And Hartford's two goals both came from essentially from set piece situations, right? The first one was a throw in, right? It was a long throw in from Sebastian Anderson. Dispay flicks it on. Samuel Carragher takes it on the volley, and it takes a really wicked deflection, I think, off Jordan Scarlett. So a little bit of a hint of fortune about that one as well. And then their second goal, the game winner, was a corner. It was another set piece. It was a Matt Real corner, not a particularly good corner, a really long kind of looping corner, and Dispay got in the right place at the right time, and then his header was also not a particularly commanding header. It just kind of looped back the other way over the keeper. I don't know. I just didn't think this was a particularly good game. But two things. One, they got 3 points, which they haven't done since April, right? Um, and two, they got goals, which they also haven't done in over a month. And it doesn't have to be pretty, right? You get the result. They're third in the table, despite all of the struggles and all of the difficulties of scoring that they've had. So, you know, take the win, take the 3 points, take the two goals, get back in training, start to iron some of those things out, and move forward.
Yeah, and definitely what's interesting is, first off, at least according to SofaScore, shout out to Matthew Rodriguez. Apparently he got a deflection on it for the own goal, at least categorized by them. But as you mentioned, kind of Brendan Burke was maybe looking for a response from his club. We see Augie Williams go to the bench, and then you have the likes of Adewale. I'm going to
Adiwale Obalola.
Adewale. Wait.
Obalola.
Obalola. Okay, my apologies,
You
Adalola.
got it.
And thank you, Oliver. Again, this is why we love Oliver. And Mishi Nigali, I can't pronounce words today.
Michi Ingalina.
Mishi
It's all right. We got
Nigali.
you. That's why I cover this team. And
And I just read the words. But yes, they were kind of on the forefront of the attack. Just talk about what the attack looked like and just overall your thoughts on, Augie Williams getting a stay on the bench.
yeah, so before the game, Brandenburg is pretty transparent that he was making the decision to sit some guys down. Um, and it ended up being Augie Williams and also Junior Moreira was the other player who had been regularly starting, who was sent to the bench in this one. And his perspective on that is we need you to produce, particularly for Augie Williams. Like you're a goal scorer. You've got 85 goals and something like that in your career in the championship. We didn't bring you here to not score goals. Uh, and I don't think Adiwale Obalola played particularly well, honestly, in this game. He had I think like 15 touches before he got subbed off in the second half, which is not great, honestly, even for a number nine who might not be might not be getting on the ball a ton. Um, and that has been sort of the story on Obalola in his last in the time he's been with Hartford over last year and this one is that he is energetic. He gets all over the pitch. He just really struggles to get on the ball in dangerous areas. It just doesn't. And then maybe he's out of position. Maybe he's not really a number nine. Maybe he'd be better playing out on the wing, which I think is where he was playing in Lithuania when he was having some success there. Was a little bit more out on the wing, but it just isn't really working out. And so while I understood Brendan Burke's desire to have um, the ability to have Augie Williams take a seat because of his lack of production. I don't really know that it worked out on the night. Now, if it lit a fire under Augie Williams, who had a goal called back for a really close offside decision late in the second half, which you could tell really frustrated him. He thought he was on. It looked very borderline to me. The angles were not good, to be sure. But if it lights a fire under Augie Williams, then it was absolutely worth it. They got 3 points, and if Augie Williams goes on a tear or even just elevates his play without necessarily becoming a major goal scorer, but if he becomes a significant contributor here, then it was absolutely worth it. But I do not think the attack, that front line of the attack, looked good. What I do think was a lot better was Samuel Carragher. Carriaga had, I think, like 45 touches on the night, which was more than any of Hartford's other attacking players by a significant margin. He was just everywhere. If you look at his heat map, like there's no heat map. He's everywhere. Like every one of those touches was on a different spot in the field. I don't think there's two that are together anywhere. And that I think is something that Hartford just didn't have without him was somebody who could be not just all over the pitch but effective. Um, he had 9 recoveries on the night. He had a handful of defensive actions. He created chances. He obviously, whether he got credit for the goal or not, he was the one that created that by shooting. He was just everywhere. He probably should have had an assist on that Augie Williams goal, which he created that chance by forcing a turnover in a dangerous position. That was something Hartford has just not had for a month, while he's really been inconsistently in the lineup and not truly available. So I thought that looked good. He looked like he's just about 100% and just about ready to go. I will say too, he was named to the team of the week. That's the 5th time he's been named to the team of the week in the last 2 seasons for the club. Which is the only player who's been named to the team of the week more times in club history is Danny Barrera. Which was 6 times in his career, or 6 first choice selections, plus a couple of times on the bench. And with Samuel Carriaga also having been, player of the match in the USL Cup final, he's very close to already being the most decorated player and individually decorated player in club history. You could make the argument that he is already because he's got the trophy and Danny Barrera never did. Um, and he showed, I think, on Saturday why he's so valuable and what makes him so good. So not totally impressed with the attack, but Carriaga I thought was quite good.
Yeah, and you talk about Carriaga getting a start, playing, getting some solid minutes, and then you also have Barry Coffey in the midfield as well too, earning the start. We kind of talked about it on the last episode, but just how important is kind of seeing these guys earn these starts for a team that's been dealing with injuries. It seems like they're starting to get those minutes under the legs, which can be very crucial, looking to integrate them into the squad, obviously with Coffee and really just build up their kind of match fitness.
Yeah, 100%. It's critical. And I think, Brendan Burke talked a little bit about this. I think it was in the preview article for the game where I wrote about it, that the competition is so important here. It's not just having these guys available on Saturday night, which is important. It's having them available Monday to Friday in training, so that when you're uh, whether you're at Day Hill Dome or whether they're training at the stadium, you are competing in those training sessions against a high level of opposition. That it's not, well, we brought up a guy from the U19s because we needed an extra body, or we have a tryout player, a trialist or something, or a squad, someone we brought in who's not on a professional contract to make up some numbers here. It's important to have those guys week in and week out, both because it means you're training against a higher level of competition, and also because it means you're looking over your shoulder. If you're Samuel Carriaga and you're locked in at number 10 and there's nobody behind you, it becomes very difficult. You have to be a special kind of player, to force yourself to be at the highest level when there's never any threat that you'll ever lose your place in the squad. Um, with Barry Coffey, who could play the same position as Carriaga, with him healthy and then both competing, it pushes both of them to be better. It pushes both of them to deliver not just on Saturday nights, but every day of the week in training. And so I think it's really, really critical for this team to have that depth for that competition in training. Having Emanuel Samadia back, he's fit, he's in training. I don't think he's going to play this weekend. He wants to play, but I think Brendan Burke is going to be very careful given the injuries they've already had. He does not want Samadia picking up a soft tissue injury because he went too hard too soon. I think we'll see him this month, maybe in Tulsa, maybe at home against New Mexico, but probably not this weekend against Brooklyn. But having that, when he's back, you have basically competition at every single position on the pitch. And that's really, really good, not just in terms of being able to select a strong squad when it's game time, but also in terms of what it pushes players to do in training.
Yeah, and we should actually probably touch on Samadia because obviously I think it came out on social media, the images of him arriving, just how important is that arrival to just boosting the overall attack beyond, obviously kind of amping up the competition and training and what have you? And I mean, you kind of talked about it earlier, but just how was Hartford, finally able to solve the solution?
So Samadia coming in, he had a visa issue. It's not really clear why there was a visa issue. There's been a little bit of finger pointing in different directions. Is this to do with immigration restrictions at the federal level? Did this get screwed up at an operational level by the club? Is there something else in the mix that we don't really know about? But there has been a lot of bit of, kind of pointing at each other around this. Um, and there was at one point where I was told that his visa had been denied and that he was not going to be in the country for a month or more if it was going to happen at all. Um, and to pull back the curtain a little bit on this, it's not uncommon historically for clubs in these situations or any employer in these situations where they have a key employee that they're trying to get in the country on a work visa to try and enlist their representatives, their federal representatives, whether it's a senator or a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, to try and leverage that influence to bring that individual into the country. Um, and that's something that the clubs are able to do, right? They're able to build those relationships with the Senator Blumenthal, for example, here in Connecticut, and then reach out and have the senator kind of lean in to help get the visa. That's kind of the underbelly of this, right? Is that it's not all merit based, it's not all efficient bureaucracy. There's a lot of hey, the senator would appreciate that this got moved to the top of the pile kind of situation. That stuff happens. And it's my understanding that ultimately the club was able to get that kind of intervention um, from Senator Blumenthal's office to bring this to fruition, which is really great, right? That they were able to leverage that. Not great that we kind of ended up there, but they were able to bring Samadia into the country a lot sooner than they had been fearing. He arrived last week. I spoke to him in training last week. He said he could play 30 minutes on Saturday. There was no way under the sun that Brandenburg was going to let him play 30 minutes on Saturday or any minutes on Saturday. Obviously didn't make the game day lineup, but he wants to be out there. Now, the difference that he makes on the pitch is there is no other player on the roster that is an attacking left-sided fullback. Montreal is a great championship level fullback, but he does not have that level of attacking um, chops that Emmanuel Samadia does. And even on Saturday, we saw the team was a little bit more balanced, left to right, which was really good. With Samadia, it will be not just balanced, but also dangerous on both sides. Um, so I think by the end of this month, we'll see him on the pitch. It might still be a couple of games for him to be fully up to speed, although honestly, he is a very, very talented player. He might be the most naturally talented player on the roster. So there is an argument that he won't need a ton of time to get up to speed because he's just very, very good. And he will slot in very, very easily, particularly alongside guys that he's been playing with. He's played with Mishi and Galena over the last 2 years. They're not going to have problems understanding each other. He's played with Jordan Starlett, TJ Prestis, Arturo Dispay, right? These guys have all played together. So it may not be as much of a learning curve, potentially. Um, as it might be. Now, guys like Augie Williams, maybe there might be a little bit more there. I don't know what their history is. Uh, they're both from Sierra Leone originally. I don't know if they have any history of playing together. But there may be some ramp up time. But he's going to make such a difference in what this team looks like. It really will be night and day when he's ready for it.
Definitely, definitely. So can't wait to see Emmanuel Samadia get back on the pitch. Like you said, don't know how much he'll feature in this upcoming matchup against Brooklyn FC. But moving on to that game, I mean, this is a real interesting one because we saw Hartford Athletic get a 2-1 win early on in the season. But in terms of the USL Cup, Brooklyn FC is top of the table. You have the likes of Hartford Athletic, Rhode Island FC, Portland Hearts of Pine, I believe Westchester's in there. So really, it's going to be intriguing because Hartford is essentially, at the bottom of the table while Brooklyn is at the top. I guess maybe kind of give the listeners just kind of a sense of just how Brooklyn has been performing so far in the league, and as well in the USL Cup.
Brooklyn hasn't been great. They've been better than Sporting Jacksonville, which is not really saying much given how poorly Sporting Jacksonville has been playing. I think the biggest change for Brooklyn since the last time Hartford saw them is that they've essentially benched Juan Carlos Obregon in the league. Former Hartford Athletic player. He started that game earlier this season when Hartford played Brooklyn. They've gone with Marcus Anderson, and Marcus Anderson obviously scored in the second half of that game. He has been much better suited to this league. I think we've observed this about Obregon before, that he's a killer at League One level, but maybe not a killer at the championship level. Um, Certainly a guy who can score some goals, but not a game changer. And Marcus Anderson appears like he's a little bit more of a game changer. So that will be an interesting development because he did really kind of eat Hartford alive in that second half of that game when he came on. He got the goal, but he had some other excellent contributions in the attacking third as well. So they've not been great. I think they will probably be better than when we saw them before. And we should remember too that when we saw them before, they really got on top of Hartford the second half of that game. Hartford were on a short week, heavily rotating, dealing with injuries. Harry Coffey couldn't even go 90 minutes. They didn't have a bunch of these guys. I think Michi and Galena maybe missed that game in Brooklyn. There's absolutely some. You could make the argument too that Hartford's in a better place, but Brooklyn, I think they're a little bit more dangerous in attack than they were then, but they're still not a particularly strong.
I mean, you say that, but they have Tommy McNamara over, so it's like, I don't know, but yes, definitely, Brooklyn kind of has struggled, and I guess thinking of, that attack, just what do you think is going to be the key, for Hartford in this match? And maybe talk about just how important this game is, for Hartford's USL Cup chances, considering how the table currently lies.
Well, it's a must win, and it's a must win in regulation. They probably can't take this to penalties and only get 2 points from it. They almost certainly need 3 points from this game, or they're basically cooked as far as defending their USL Cup title is concerned. So I think that's a motivating factor for this club to get out there and get after it. And the other thing too is that because the USL Cup tiebreakers are based on goals scored, and Hartford currently has also 0 goals scored in that competition, there's a strong incentive for them to get out there and try and get 2, maybe 3 goals in this game if they can. So I would fully expect a very strong lineup, trying to get out there to score some goals. The challenge with that is that Maimonides Park is a really crap place to play. It's it's one of these converted baseball stadiums. It's very narrow. The turf sucks, even more so than Trinity Health at the moment. It's really bad situation. So it's not a great environment to try to be going out there to when you're like, oh, we got to score 3. But I think they have to go for it anyway. The key for Hartford, I think, defensively, thinking about Brooklyn's attack, is they have to remain disciplined. When Marcus Anderson scored against Hartford in that game, he obviously, he finished the move, he persisted, but Hartford could have cleared that ball, right? They just kind of whiffed on the clearance, and there was maybe a little bit of miscommunication along the back, and something developed for Marcus Anderson that it developed because he was persistent, but it shouldn't have developed because Hartford should have snuffed out that opportunity. And that's, I think, exactly what they have to do on Saturday. They have to not allow the persistence of the Brooklyn attack and the persistence of a player like Marcus Anderson to produce a quality opportunity. They have to lock these things down. Anthony Siaha had like 10 saves in that game. Obviously, he can have 10 saves in the game. He's totally capable of doing that. But they don't want him to have 10 saves in this game. Ideally, Anthony Siaha doesn't have to make a single save in this game. That he can get a clean sheet without having to even get his gloves dirty. But I do think Hartford, that back line, Fisher, Scarlett, Dispay is almost certainly what it's going to be for now. We might see Babacar and Jai off the bench again. He's pretty close to full health, and he's certainly going to make a strong case for playing. But I would suspect that unless Brendan Burke has a reason to, he's not going to break up that back three. They've been very, very disciplined. They've got a very good understanding. So I think they have to maintain that focus while at the same time um, making sure that they are kind of the protagonists of the game, that they're trying to get forward. But that focus will be key.
Definitely, definitely. And I think, before we head on to our next topic, I do want to just ask, what are maybe your expectations, for how the attack will look? Do you think we see Augie Williams get back into the starting 11, and just what are maybe some of the keys for this kind of, goal scoring outburst, if you will, considering the fact that Hartford was unable to score any goals, in the previous month. Just how does Hartford maybe keep up, positive levels of attack, and, not all of a sudden go off a cliff in terms of scoring goals?
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see if Augie Williams gets back in the starting 11. I could see it. I think he came on and gave a good account of himself. He he apparently responded very positively in training to kind of being informed that he was going to be benched for that game. He didn't go sulking. He didn't pout. He showed up to training, and that's how you get your spot back, right? Is you show up, you train well, you make the most of the minutes that are allotted to you. I don't think Brendan Burke is going to penalize him because he was maybe offside on that goal and it didn't count. So I could see Augie Williams getting back in, particularly because I don't think Adewale Obalola did a lot to maintain the spot himself. And Brendan Burke is, again, like I said, he's not sentimental. He is absolutely going to put out the roster that he thinks, the lineup that he thinks is going to help him win the game. So I could see Augie Williams back at number 9 for this one for sure. Um, I could potentially, I could see maybe Barry Coffey and Samuel Carriga don't both start in this one. It's going to be interesting to see how Brendan Burke manages that going forward. Does he see Barry Coffey maybe playing as a little bit more of a right-sided attacking midfielder than as a number 10? Does he play Carriaga and Coffey kind of together in the middle of the park? What does he do with that when they're both healthy and available? Because if they both are earning minutes, it's going to make it very hard to sit one of them down. So there could be some interesting decisions here. I think the biggest thing I would maybe I wouldn't say expect, but the thing that would not surprise me would be to see Augie Williams back in. Um, and other than that, I wouldn't anticipate a lot of changes. I think overall, everybody else has probably continued to earn their spot. There is just kind of that lingering question of what to do with Carriaga and Coffey. Are you going to play both of them at the same
Definitely. And now to go from, the not USL Jägermeister Cup to the USLW, because that lovely time of the year. Season is about to kick off for the lovely Vermont Green, but also the USLW season is going to kick off, and we're going to see Hartford Athletic, put out a women's side that will participate in the league. Lots of, interesting teams. You have New England Mutiny, you have Vermont Green FC. And it's going to be interesting to kind of see the growth of Hartford Athletic, the growth of the women's game kind of continue. I know, Oliver, you were at kind of an event before the previous game. I guess just maybe, some of your takeaways just on the initial kind of vibes surrounding the club, and maybe getting to see, coaches and players and what have you.
one? Yeah. Well, I'll say the fans are psyched for this. Like the fans are totally up for this. I think everyone's a little frustrated. These are all going to be weeknight games. And then it's going to make for some really, really hectic weeks if you're trying to go to even, I think there's one week where they play twice at home, and then there's a men's home game on the Saturday. So it's going to be really, really a little brutal. But they're psyched. Like overall, the vibe was excellent. The turnout for that event, despite the rain, despite the turnout for the game not being particularly good, the turnout for the event, introducing the women's team and doing the kit reveal was really, really good. Um, so I think there's a lot of enthusiasm. I heard they've sold something like 500 season tickets, which is really, I think, quite good under the circumstances. We'll see how that develops. We'll see how many single games they sell. But honestly, 500 tickets for 5 home games is really good business. I personally think, given that this is really the first run of this. I had the opportunity to talk to Danny Barrera, the head coach, a little bit this week. It's interesting as you look at this because there's not an extended preseason. These women started training this past weekend together as a club, and then their first home game is, I think like 11 days later. It's next Tuesday. So you don't have a lot of time to install anything. You don't have a lot of time to develop super complex tactics. It has to be very plug and play almost. Um, and then there's only 10 games. You don't have, oh, well, we got off to a bumpy start, but we'll turn it around in August. No, you don't get that. You got to hit it from the jump. Um, I view a league like this as an opportunity, right? Because almost all of these teams are new this season. CT United obviously has had an academy for a long time. Uh, New England Mutiny has been around, right? They're not a new entity. Vermont Green obviously know what they're doing, right, as an organization in terms of putting a club together. None of these teams have really done this before in the W League. It's not like you're coming into an established league where you've got perennial playoff contenders and all these things. It's pretty fresh, and so there's an opportunity for Hartford if they brought in the right players, if they have if Danny Barrera has kind of figured out the way to have instant success in a league like this, then they could really make a run at it. There's no reason they couldn't, right? There's nothing blocking them. And they put together a team that I think is pretty typical for this kind of league. It's mostly college players, some recent graduates, a couple of more experienced veterans. Brianna Hines, who has, I think, 40 appearances for the Trinidad and Tobago national team, has previously been affiliated with Hartford Athletic as a coach in the academy and also in the front office. Is playing. Dolly Richardson has 40 plus appearances spread across the NWSL and USL Super League pro experience. They have a couple of other players who are a little bit more in that veteran camp to balance out. So it's hard to say. Like it's really hard to say how successful this team could possibly be. I don't think there's any reason they couldn't be successful, but it's really hard to say what that's actually going to translate to. You know, Danny Barrera talked about when you become a manager, you look for players who played like you. That's what you're drawn to initially, right? You don't necessarily only sign those players, but that's where your eye is drawn. And he was a very technical player, wanted the ball at his feet. He was a passing machine, never a great dribbler, right? He was not attacking defenses with his dribbling. He was never a really physical player. If that's the kind of player he's brought in, will that be successful? I don't know, right? Like, will bringing in more technical players uh, be successful? That's something we've seen not be super successful in the USL Championship. I have no idea what it means for the W League, right? To have that be your kind of thrust. So we'll see. The vibe from training with the women was that they had a lot of attacking talent. They felt confident that they could get forward, that they could score goals. That's probably good. I suspect, given the nature of this league, that if you can't score goals, you're going to be in trouble. You're probably not going to be able to ride a solid defense when you've only got 10 games to figure it out. So that's encouraging that they feel good about that. We'll find out. I have no idea what Vermont Green squad is really going to look like. I mean, I have a guess, right, based on what they've done, but I don't know what it's going to look like on the pitch. So we'll see, how those things match up on next Tuesday night, I think it is. The other thing on Saturday was they did a kit reveal, right? So the women are getting their own kit. And I will say the immediate response from fans was not overwhelmingly positive. I suspect that the kit will sell well regardless because there's a little bit of a built-in base to buy kits for a women's team. I think that will be um, a pretty easy sell in a way that maybe the men's kit isn't sometimes. But it's not a. I was not blown away personally by the kits. Also notable in that, not necessarily about the women's team exclusively, was they're switching to Capelli as the kit manufacturer, and I did confirm that they're intending to switch to Capelli for the men as well. We'll see if
Oh,
that changes.
Oliver, no. Oh man, now they're gonna have the same jersey manufacturer as Rhode Island FC. Is that allowed?
Well, I don't know. That might be a conflict of interest for Capelli that produce kits for both clubs.
I mean, it might be okay if they give us like exclusive El Climaco jerseys, then I'll be able to overlook it. But if it's just Capelli, then eh.
So, but anyway, I think the vibe around the women's team is good right now. It's fresh, it's new. There's no reason it can't be good. You don't have to spend a lot of money because it's an amateur league, so it's not like, oh, we didn't spend $2.5 million on the roster, so we're never going to be successful. It's 10 games. You get out there, you get after it. They have, I think, looking at the profile of the players they brought in, they do feel like the kind of players who could be successful in this league, who could take them to the playoffs. When you get to the playoffs, who the hell knows? So the vibe is good. I think the fans are psyched. It's short. It'll be some nice warm nights in May and June for some home games, and I think everyone will probably enjoy it, regardless of the size of the beer.
Yeah, and I mean, first off, 100 season tickets, pretty impressive. I mean, they have to pay people essentially to go to Revs 2 games. And that's a professional team. Um, this is pre-professional soccer for those of you that don't know. Like Oliver said, USL2, USLW, primarily college players. I mean, the fact that they're having some players with NWSL experience and international experience is definitely good for Hartford, obviously because I'm a Vermont Green nerd. Essentially, they've kind of have a large college, and they have one player, I think, who has professional experience. Actually, I think two. One of them played professionally on some professional ranks in Italy, and there was another who I believe played professionally in Australia. They do have some players that were involved in the U.S. youth ranks, and obviously still could be involved. So definitely a talented a squad, but these are definitely going to be great games to watch. Obviously, like you said, probably going to be a jam-packed schedule, and to touch on the jerseys, I just love a nice star wipe effect. So love seeing all the star wipes on the jersey. The color is interesting. Definitely very few kind of very red is what I'll say. There is a more of a focus on red. But overall, I mean, like you said, I think there's still plenty of those jerseys. And I mean, Oliver, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but there's going to be so many matches. We've heard from, Brendan Burke, and we've heard, in your reporting about the turf, I guess. How do you feel the stadium is going to hold up, and just kind of maybe why has the turf taken so long to be fixed, and why was it kind of allowed to kind of deteriorate, if you will?
Yeah. So what I heard was that the turf needed some maintenance, particularly replacing the infill, the cork infill. Needed it at the conclusion of the 2025 season, and it was delayed. It was deferred from October to this spring. It was supposed to be completed before the start of the season. It wasn't. It was put off. It was supposed to be done then before this last homestand for Hartford Athletic, and it wasn't done. Um, that's an operational issue, and I think that has to land at the feet of the former chief operating officer for why that didn't happen in a timely fashion. My understanding is that the materials had been procured, they just weren't installed in a timely fashion. So I think that's one of those things, and I talked about this in the article on Saturday, where the mindset that produces, the shrinking $2 beers doesn't just stay on the fan side of operations. If that's your operational mindset, at some point it spills over in other ways, right? Brendan Burke can only control the things that are purely on the technical side. Anything like, oh, the turf needs maintenance, that's now a larger operational issue that falls outside of the first team coach, and should fall outside the first team coach, right? In any healthy organization, somebody else is responsible. So I think it has to land there. It has to land in the front office, and it has to land with the person who was in charge of the decision making there, which was Michelle Rue. Now, what role did Bruce Mandel play in that? Who knows? What role is Bruce Mandel going to play in decisions like that going forward? Unclear, right? How much he's actually going to micromanage or manage any of those decisions. It is a concern more generally that the stadium is getting such heavy use. It is not typical for a professional stadium to get a lot of non-game day use. right? If you talk about you know, top tier stadiums in Europe, for example, like the first team plays there, and that might be it for some stadiums. They might get used 17 times a year. End of story. And maybe, if there's a high level women's team playing, then maybe they get used another 17 times a year. Hartford is using that for academy training. They're going to have the women's team playing and training there. They have the men training there some days because of problems with availability, full availability at Day Hill Dome, and also some operational issues at Day Hill Dome where Day Hill did not maintain their grass fields over the winter, and so it's not possible to train on them. Or it's not possible for Hartford to train on them. They may be using them for youth activities. I don't know, but they don't seem particularly safe at the moment. So there is a concern that the Trinity Health Stadium is going to get too much use, and it's going to continually degrade the turf, and it's going to create an enormous expense in keeping it maintained at a professional level. It becomes hard on the bodies of the players when it gets worn down the way it has. It impacts the game when the turf becomes slick and shiny, which you could see just by looking at it this last week that it was, it was just basically shiny all over, which is not what you want to see from the playing surface. So it is a concern that the stadium is not being maintained at the level that's appropriate to the USL Championship. Now, that said, Brooklyn is playing in a freaking baseball stadium where they've got turf over the pitchers. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like even the worst situation in the championship, but it is something to keep an eye on because, replacing that cork infill probably runs something like $45,000 for the club every time they have to do it. And when the club is talking about, oh, we lose money every year, that's not something we want to be having to do with any more regularity than they really need to. And I think that then connects to the larger problem, which is that Day Hill Dome is not a long-term solution for this club. They need to identify a location for a training facility of their own and build it. And that's not, I mean, I say that trivially, right? Like they've got, $100 million lying around to do something like that or whatever it might end up costing. But I don't think it's optional. I think if Hartford is really going to commit to having a W League team, essentially having a Super League team, continuing to have the men's team, continuing to have an academy, they have got to identify a location to build out a real training facility so they're not fully reliant.
Definitely, and I mean, we've kind of seen that kind of play out, in terms of, not like you said, the availability. You kind of saw it play out in other areas with kind of the preseason setup. So definitely, hopefully we see the team and franchise figure it out. But I mean, Oliver, I just want to say you're a legend. But we really appreciate everybody who was listening along. Again, please go support Oliver's work. He does a great job covering Hartford Athletic, whether it's the men's or women's side, or just, organizational front office stuff. So, make sure to give him some love. And again, make sure to listen to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. We also post a video on YouTube so you can see our lovely faces. And now with my new glasses, you can watch the show in my glasses. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, make sure to follow us and, like and subscribe there. Make sure to give us reviews wherever you're listening. And we just do really appreciate your support. And Oliver, as always, let the people know maybe what you got planned and any final words.
Yeah, so we'll continue to have coverage of the W League. As I said, I was able to talk to Danny Brewer and a couple of the players this week, and I hope to do so again before that first home game on Tuesday. So we'll have some coverage, um, not just of the team, but also of some of the individuals associated with it, which I think is really important to get to know some of those players. And any further fallout in the front office or news we're hearing about what the plans are operationally for Harper going forward. I think it's a big story. It's a major inflection point for the club. Michelle Rue had been with the club for 7 years, and not in that capacity. She had grown from other roles, but it's a major turning point, and I think we want to continue to hear more, and so we'll continue to have coverage of that as event for it. And the final word for me, I'll just tie it back to the article. Don't insidify your product, guys. Whatever it is, don't insidify it. It's not good news.